You bitch, you remember.
I remember everything.
You sold me out. You gave them the root. You betrayed me.
Aaron turned his back. His broad shoulders blocked the dim light in the room. He pushed a glass jar of dried mint out of the way on the workbench. I do not know how you find anything in this mess, Celine, he muttered. He sounded annoyed but mostly just stressed about his trucks. Celine raised the rusted iron pipe. Her palms were sweaty. The metal felt heavy and cold in her hands. She did not close her eyes. She wanted to see it. She wanted to watch him fall. She swung the heavy pipe down with every single ounce of strength in her body. The heavy iron hit the back of his head with a loud, wet crack. Aaron did not scream. He just let out a sharp grunt. His knees folded under him. He crashed forward into the workbench. Jars of dried herbs fell and shattered on the concrete floor. He dropped to his hands and knees. Celine stood over him. She was breathing fast. Her chest went up and down heavily. She raised the pipe to hit him again. But Aaron was not a normal man. He was a monster who survived in the dirt. He reached up and grabbed the edge of the table. He turned his head slowly. Blood poured down the back of his neck, soaking the white collar of his expensive shirt. His hazel eyes locked onto her. The shock in his eyes only lasted 1 second. Then it turned into pure hot rage. "You bitch," Aaron hissed. He spit blood onto the floor. "You remember." "I remember everything," Celine said flatly. She swung the pipe at his face. Aaron threw his arm up. The iron pipe hit his forearm with a loud thud. He did not even flinch. He grabbed the middle of the pipe with his big hand. He yanked it hard. Celine stumbled forward. Aaron grabbed her by the throat with his free hand. He stood up, pushing her backward until her spine slammed against the cold concrete wall. The air rushed out of her lungs. "You sold me out," Aaron snarled. His face was inches from hers. His breath smelled like whiskey and copper. Blood dripped from his dark hair onto her cheek. "You gave the military the root. You smiled in my face and kissed me, and you sent my men to die." "They deserve to die," Celine choked out. She clawed at his thick fingers on her neck. "And so do you." Aaron's grip tightened. He looked crazy. The man who pretended to be her sweet husband was completely gone. "I gave you the world, Celine. I built a whole life for you. I kept you safe." "You pushed me off a cliff," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You stole my mind. You stole 2 years of my life." Aaron did not look sorry. He looked furious. "I did it because you were going to leave me for him, for that stupid soldier. I could not let you go. You are mine." Celine let go of his hand on her throat. She stopped fighting his grip. Instead, she reached her hand down to the waistband of his dark pants. She felt the cold, hard metal of his gun tucked into his holster. She wrapped her fingers tightly around the grip. She pulled the heavy gun free. Aaron felt the movement. His eyes went wide. He let go of her throat and grabbed for her wrist. Celine brought the heavy metal bottom of the gun up. She smashed it directly into his nose. Aaron yelled in pain. He stumbled backward, covering his face with both hands. Blood poured heavily through his fingers. Celine did not wait. She stepped forward and hit him again. This time she hit him across the side of his head with the barrel of the gun. It was a hard, nasty hit. Aaron's eyes rolled back in his head. He collapsed onto the cold concrete floor like a heavy sack of dirt. He did not move. Celine stood over him. Her hands shook violently. She pointed the gun down at his chest. Her finger rested on the trigger. She wanted to pull it. She wanted to put a bullet right through his black heart. She wanted to watch him stop breathing forever. But killing him down here in the basement was too easy. Silas had promised to make him beg. Silas deserved to look this monster in the eyes, too. Celine lowered the gun. She stepped over Aaron's bloody body. She grabbed the heavy set of keys from his belt. She walked out of the clinic and pulled the massive iron door shut. It was very heavy and it made a loud screeching sound. She slid the master key into the lock and turned it. The deadbolt clicked into place with a heavy, final thud. Aaron was locked in. The clinic had no windows. The walls were thick concrete. No one would hear him scream when he woke up. He was trapped in the very room where he had kept her mind in a fog for 2 years. It was perfect. Celine turned and ran up the stairs. She kept the gun tight in her hand. The main floor of the mansion was total chaos. The quiet, cold house was suddenly filled with loud voices and panic. Guards ran down the halls holding rifles. No one noticed her slipping out of the basement door. "The boss is not answering his radio," a guard yelled from the front room. "Travis says the military wiped out the whole convoy. They are coming here next. Lock the front gates, another man screamed. Get everyone to the windows. Celine stayed in the shadows of the long hallway. She moved toward the back kitchen door. She had to get outside to the hollow tree. That was the meeting spot. Silas would come looking for her there. She slipped into the kitchen. Lynn, the quiet maid, was hiding under the large marble island. She was crying and shaking. Celine stopped. She looked at the young girl. Lynn had never helped her, but she had never hurt her either. She was just another girl trapped in Erin's sick world. Lynn, Celine said softly. The maid jumped and looked up. She saw the gun in Celine's hand and her eyes filled with pure terror. Listen to me, Celine said. She crouched down so she was at eye level with the girl. There are bad men coming to this house. The guards are going to die. You need to leave. Run out the back door and go hide in the tall grass past the dirt road. Do not come back until the sun is up. Lynn just stared at her, totally frozen. Go, Celine ordered, making her voice harsh. Run. Lynn scrambled out from under the counter and ran for the back door. She threw it open and disappeared into the dark, hot night. Celine followed her out. The heavy heat of the Texas night hit her right away. The mud squished under her bare feet. She had lost her shoes somewhere. She did not care at all. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the ground. It was so loud it made Celine's ears ring. A huge ball of orange fire lit up the sky over the front gates of the estate. Silas was here. He did not wait at his base. He destroyed the trucks on Highway 87, and then he drove his squad straight to the mansion to get her. He was blowing the front gates to hell. Heavy gunfire erupted. The loud, fast cracking of military rifles cut through the night. Erin's guards started shooting back from the windows of the big house. The quiet estate turned into a bloody war zone in just 10 seconds. Celine ran. She stayed low to the ground. She moved fast through the tall, wet grass. She headed away from the front gates, moving toward the old rusted iron fence in the back. The mud splashed up the back of her legs. The dark red dress was ruined. She gripped the gun so hard her hand cramped. She reached the giant, dying oak tree. She leaned against the rough bark, trying to catch her breath. The air tasted like smoke and burning metal. She looked out past the fence. The brush was completely dark. She could not see anyone in the trees. Silas, she whispered into the dark. There was no answer, just the loud sound of guns firing back at the mansion. Silas, she said a little louder. Suddenly, a heavy hand grabbed her shoulder from behind. Celine spun around. She brought the gun up fast, pointing it right at the chest of the person standing behind her. Whoa, easy, Wildcat, it is me. Silas stood there. He had his hands held up, showing her he was not a threat. He was wearing his heavy green military gear. His face was still painted with black grease. He looked down at the gun in her hand, then up at her face. A slow, cocky smirk spread across his lips. You actually look pretty hot holding a gun, Silas said. His voice was low and rough. Celine dropped her arm. She let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You are an idiot, you blew up the front gates. I told you I was coming for you, Silas said. He stepped closer to her. He did not care about the gun in her hand. He did not care about the war happening 50 yards away. He wrapped his big arms around her waist and pulled her flush against his chest. I do not wait when it comes to what is mine. I am not yours, Celine muttered, but she leaned her head against his broad shoulder. He smelled like gunpowder and sweat. It was the best thing she had ever smelled. Yeah, you are, Silas whispered. He buried his face in her dark hair. He held her so tight she could barely breathe. I wiped them out, Celine. Every single truck on Highway 87 is burning right now. The military has the whole area locked down. Erin lost everything. I know, Celine said. She tilted her head up to look at him. And I locked him in the basement. Silas pulled back a little. His dark eyes widened in surprise. You what? He caught me getting ready to leave, Celine said. Her voice went very cold. I hit him in the head with an iron pipe. I beat him with his own gun. Then I locked him inside the underground clinic. He is trapped down there. Silas stared at her. A heavy, dark look of pure pride covered his face. He reached up and touched the blood on her cheek. It was Erin's blood. You beat him down. I told you I was not a victim, Celine said. She lifted her chin. Damn, Silas growled. He leaned down and kissed her hard. It was rough and hungry. It tasted like violence and pure relief. He pulled away just enough to look her in the eyes. I am going to marry you one day, you know that, right? Celine rolled her eyes, but she felt a hot flush spread across her chest. Focus, Commander. Your men are shooting up the house. We need to finish this. My guys can handle the guards, Silas said. He looked over her shoulder at the mansion. Thick black smoke was pouring out of the front windows. But Aaron is mine. You locked him in the clinic. Yes, Celine said. She handed Silas the heavy ring of keys she took from Aaron's belt. The silver one opens the iron door. Silas took the keys, his jaw clenched tight. The cocky smile was totally gone. He looked like a killer again. Stay here, hide behind the tree. When I come back, we are leaving. I am coming with you, Celine said. She held up the gun. I want to watch him realize he lost. Silas looked at the gun, then back at her. He knew better than to argue with her when she had that hard look in her eyes. Fine, stay behind me. If anyone shoots, you drop to the ground, understand? I am not a child, Silas, she said. You are stubborn as hell, he muttered. He grabbed his own rifle and started walking toward the back door of the house. Celine followed him. They moved fast through the dark grass. The shooting at the front of the house had slowed down. Silas's soldiers were professional. They were taking out Aaron's guards quickly and quietly. They slipped through the back kitchen door. The lights in the house were flickering. Smoke was starting to fill the hallways. Silas moved like a dark shadow. He kept his rifle raised, checking every single corner. They walked down the stairs to the basement. The air down here was still cold. The heavy iron door of the clinic was right where Celine had left it. Silas stood in front of the door. He looked at Celine. He held up his hand, holding up 3 fingers. He was counting down. 3, 2, 1. He slid the silver key into the lock and turned it. He kicked the heavy iron door open with his heavy boot. It slammed against the concrete wall with a massive bang. Silas stepped into the room, his rifle pointed straight ahead. Celine stepped in right behind him. The clinic was a total mess. Broken glass and dried herbs covered the floor. Aaron was sitting up, leaning against the far wall. He held a bloody towel to his nose. He looked terrible. His perfect suit was ruined. His face was covered in blood. He looked up when they walked in. When Aaron saw Silas, his hazel eyes filled with absolute burning hate. You, Aaron hissed. He spit blood onto the floor. Me, Silas said. His voice was a deep, dark rumble. He lowered his rifle just an inch, completely relaxed. He looked at the broken Mafia boss like he was a bug on the bottom of his boot. Your trucks are gone, Aaron. Your men are dead or in handcuffs. Your house is burning. Aaron looked past Silas. He saw Celine standing there holding his gun. You dirty bitch, Aaron snarled. He tried to stand up, but he stumbled and fell back against the wall. I saved you. I loved you. You stole me, Celine said. Her voice was ice cold. She did not feel a single drop of pity for him. You pushed me down a mountain. You fed me drugs so I would forget my life. That is not love, that is sickness. Aaron laughed. It sounded wet and broken. I made you a queen. You would be nothing without me. Silas took a step forward. He reached down to his belt and pulled out a heavy hunting knife. The metal shined in the dim light. I do not really care to hear you talk anymore. Aaron's eyes locked on the knife. For the first time he looked scared. You cannot kill me. I have politicians in my pocket. I have judges. If I die, they will come after you. I am the military, Aaron, Silas said flatly. I do not answer to your dirty judges, and no one is going to care about a drug boss who died in a shootout with his own men. Celine, Aaron begged. He looked at her, his voice going soft. He tried to use his old trick. He tried to sound sweet and vulnerable. Celine, do not let him do this. I am your husband. We share a bed. Tell him to stop. Celine stared at him. She felt nothing but disgust. You are not my husband. You are just a dead man. Silas moved fast. He grabbed Aaron by the front of his bloody shirt and hauled him up to his feet. He slammed Aaron hard against the concrete wall. Aaron groaned in pain. This is for putting your hands on her, Silas whispered. He drove his knee hard into Aaron's stomach. Aaron choked and bent forward. Silas hit him across the jaw with a heavy fist. Aaron's head snapped to the side. He dropped to his knees again, completely broken. Silas, Celine said quietly. Silas stopped. He looked back at her. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wild with violence. Celine stepped forward. She looked down at Aaron. He was bleeding from his mouth, his nose, his head. He looked pathetic. I want him to spend the rest of his life in a concrete box, Celine said. Her voice was perfectly steady. Killing him is too fast. He locked my mind in a box for 2 years. I want him to sit in a tiny cell and remember this exact moment for 50 years. I want him to know that a clumsy village girl destroyed his whole empire. Silas looked at Erin on the floor, then looked at Celine. A slow smile spread across his face. You are cold, baby, I love it. Erin looked up at her. His eyes were full of tears and blood. You will never be safe without me, I will find you. Celine lifted the heavy black gun. She pointed it directly at his kneecap. Do not ever look for me, she said. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening inside the small concrete room. Erin screamed. It was a high, terrible scream. He clutched his leg and rolled on the floor in pure agony. Celine lowered the gun. Her hands were not shaking anymore. She felt light. She felt free. Call your men, Celine said to Silas. She did not even look at Erin rolling in his own blood. Tell them to arrest him. I am ready to go home. Silas stared at the smoking barrel of the gun in Celine's hand. He looked at Erin, who was whining and thrashing on the concrete floor, holding his shattered knee. Then Silas looked back at Celine. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face, flashing white teeth against his black grease paint. Remind me never to piss you off, Silas murmured. He reached out and gently took the gun from her trembling fingers. He tucked it into the back of his waistband. Then he pressed a button on his shoulder radio. Bravo team, get down to the basement clinic. We have a package ready for pickup. Try not to slip on the blood. Copy that, Commander, a voice crackled back through the speaker. Silas stepped over Erin's rolling body and wrapped his arm around Celine's waist. He pulled her flush against his side. She was shivering, but she kept her chin up. She refused to look at Erin again. The man who had controlled her every breath for 2 years was finally just a pathetic mess on the floor. Let's get out of this rat hole, Silas said. He turned her toward the heavy iron door. They walked up the concrete stairs as 3 of Silas's soldiers rushed past them, moving fast with their rifles raised. Celine did not look back. When they reached the main floor, the heat of the fire hit them instantly. The entire front wing of the mansion was burning. Thick, dark smoke rolled across the high ceilings. The fancy paintings and expensive rugs Erin loved so much were covered in soot and water. Silas did not rush. He walked with a slow, confident swagger, guiding her through the smoke. He held her tight against his chest, shielding her from the heat and the sparks. They stepped out of the broken front doors and into the muggy Texas night. The rain had stopped, but the air was sticky and thick. Military trucks were parked all over the manicured lawn. Soldiers were dragging Erin's surviving guards out to the dirt road, slapping metal cuffs on their wrists. The giant iron front gates were completely blown off their hinges. Twisted metal burned in the mud. Silas led Celine to a massive, black armored truck parked near the trees. He opened the heavy passenger door and lifted her up by her waist, setting her on the high seat. Stay put, he ordered, his voice rough. I need to give my men the final sweep orders. I am not going anywhere, Celine said flatly. She leaned back against the dark leather seat. She felt completely drained. Her dark red dress was ripped and covered in mud. Her bare feet were cut and dirty. She smelled like smoke and old blood. Silas smirked at her. He reached up and wiped a smudge of dirt off her nose with his thumb. Good girl. He slammed the door shut. Celine watched him walk over to a group of his soldiers. He was so much bigger than the other men. He stood tall, pointing at the burning house and giving sharp, quick orders. He moved like a natural leader. 2 years ago, he was just a rough boy who liked to fix old cars and get into fistfights behind the local bar. Now he commanded an entire army unit. He had built himself into a weapon just so he could tear down the man who took her. 10 minutes later, Silas jogged back to the truck. He opened the driver's side door and climbed in. He tossed his rifle into the back seat and started the heavy engine. It roared to life, shaking the whole cabin. My guys have the rest, Silas said. He shifted the truck into gear and slammed his foot on the gas. The massive tires spit mud as they tore across the grass and out the broken front gates. Erin is going to a black site prison. He will never see the sun again. Celine stared out the window. The dark trees flashed by as they hit the main road. Good, let him rot. Silas drove in silence for a few miles. He kept the headlights off, driving using a pair of night vision goggles pulled down over his eyes. The dark Texas highway stretched out empty and black in front of them. The tension inside the truck was thick. It was not a bad tension. It was heavy, hot, and full of all the things they had not said to each other yet. You have terrible taste in men, you know that, Silas said suddenly. His voice was low and teasing. Celine snapped her head to look at him. She crossed her arms over her chest. "Excuse me." Silas did not look away from the road, but that cocky smirk was back on his face. "I mean, look at the guy. He wears stupid suits. He drinks weak whiskey. And he let a tiny girl with a metal pipe beat his ass in his own basement. If you were going to replace me, you could have done a lot better." Celine let out a short, sharp laugh. It surprised her. It felt good to laugh. "I did not replace you, you dumbass. I was drugged, and for the record, I hit him really hard." "Oh, I saw," Silas chuckled. He reached over and dropped his large hand onto her bare knee. His fingers were rough and warm. "You busted his nose wide open. I was a little turned on, honestly." Celine rolled her eyes, but she did not push his hand away. "You are sick." "I am just saying," Silas said. His thumb rubbed a slow circle on her skin, sending hot shivers up her leg. "I like a girl who handles her own business, but next time maybe let me shoot the guy who kidnaps you. It is kind of my job." "There is not going to be a next time," Celine said. She leaned her head back against the seat and looked at him. The green glow from the dashboard lit up his sharp jaw and the dark grease on his face. "I am never letting a man control me again." Silas went quiet. He squeezed her knee gently, then pulled his hand back to grip the steering wheel. The playful teasing dropped away. His face got serious. "I know," Silas said softly. "I am not going to control you, Celine. I just want to keep you safe." "I can keep myself safe," she replied instantly. Her voice was sharper than she meant it to be. Silas glanced at her. His dark eyes were heavy with a mix of guilt and anger. "You shouldn't have had to. I should have found you sooner. I tore this whole damn state apart looking for you. When the police said you fell in the river, I knew it was a lie. I knew you would not just fall. But Aaron covered his tracks too well. By the time I found out he had you, it had been a year and a half. I spent the last 6 months building this operation just to get you out." Celine swallowed hard. She felt a lump form in her throat. While she had been trapped in that mansion, living a fake life, Silas had been tearing the world apart trying to find her. He had never stopped looking. "You found me," she whispered. She reached across the console and placed her hand over his on the steering wheel. "That is all that matters now." Silas turned his hand over and linked his fingers with hers. He squeezed her hand tight. He did not say anything else, but he did not let go for the rest of the drive. They drove for an hour, heading deep into the empty plains. Finally, Silas pulled the heavy truck off the highway and onto a hidden dirt road. They bounced over deep ruts and thick mud until a large, heavily guarded military compound appeared out of the dark. Tall wire fences topped with sharp metal rings surrounded rows of low, concrete buildings. Silas flashed an ID card at the front gate, and the guards quickly waved them inside. He parked the truck in front of a small, square building set away from the main barracks. "This is my private quarters," Silas said. He turned off the engine. "No one comes in here but me. You are safe here." Celine nodded. She opened her door and slid down from the high seat. Her bare feet hit the cold, wet gravel. She winced as a sharp rock dug into her heel. Silas was around the truck in 2 seconds. He did not ask permission. He just bent down, scooped her up into his arms, and carried her toward the door. "I can walk, Silas," Celine muttered. She pushed lightly against his chest. "Your feet are bleeding, Wildcat," Silas said flatly. He carried her up the short steps and kicked the front door open. "Shut up and let me carry you." Celine stopped arguing. She wrapped her arms around his neck and rested her head against his shoulder. He walked into the small building and shut the door behind them with his boot. The inside was simple and clean. There was a small living room with a brown leather couch, a tiny kitchen, and a hallway leading to a bedroom and bathroom. Everything smelled like him. Clean soap, leather, and strong coffee. Silas carried her straight into the bathroom. He set her down gently on the edge of the large white bathtub. He turned on the water and tested the temperature with his hand. "You need a shower," Silas said. He stood up and looked down at her. "You are covered in mud and blood." Celine looked down at her hands. They were stained with dark, dried blood from Aaron's face. She felt a sudden, heavy wave of exhaustion hit her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her feeling hollow and tired. "Yeah," she whispered. Her voice sounded thin. Silas reached down and grabbed the hem of his dark green shirt. He pulled it over his head and threw it on the floor. His chest and stomach were covered in thick scars and dark tattoos. He had completely changed from the boy she knew. He was built like a tank now. He grabbed a clean white towel from the rack and handed it to her. "Take your time. I will find you some clean clothes." He turned to leave the bathroom, but Celine reached out and grabbed his wrist. Silas stopped. He looked back at her. His dark eyes were hot and intense. "Do not go far," Celine said. She hated how weak she sounded, but she could not help it. The silence in the small room was too loud. It reminded her too much of the clinic. Silas stepped closer. He placed his large hands on either side of her on the edge of the tub. He leaned down until his face was right in front of hers. "I am going to be right outside this door," Silas said. His voice was a deep, rough rumble that vibrated in her chest. "I am not leaving you, Celine, never again." He stared at her lips for a second, fighting with himself. Then he pushed off the tub and walked out of the bathroom, pulling the door shut behind him. Celine let out a shaky breath. She stood up and peeled the ruined red dress off her body. She let it drop to the floor like a dirty rag. She stepped into the hot shower and let the water wash away the mud, the sweat, and the sick feeling of Erin's touch. She stood under the spray until her skin turned pink and the water ran clear. When she finally stepped out and wrapped the towel around her body, she found a stack of clean clothes sitting on the counter. A pair of grey sweatpants and a soft black t-shirt. They belonged to Silas, and they were huge on her. She got dressed, rolling the waistband of the pants down 3 times just so they would stay up. The shirt hung off her shoulder, falling halfway down her thighs. It smelled strongly of his clean scent. It made her feel safe. She walked out into the living room. Silas was sitting on the leather couch. He had washed his face and changed into a pair of loose black athletic pants, but he was still shirtless. He was leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the blank television screen. He looked up when she walked in. His eyes slowly dragged up her body, taking in his clothes hanging off her small frame. A hot, dark hunger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly hid it away. "You look better," Silas said. He leaned back against the couch and patted the cushion next to him. "Come here." Celine walked over and sat down. She pulled her knees up to her chest, curling into a small ball. She left a foot of space between them. "Are you hungry?" Silas asked. He turned to face her. "I have awful military food in the kitchen, but I can make you a sandwich." "I am not hungry," Celine said. She rested her chin on her knees. She stared at his chest, tracing the thick, jagged scar that ran across his ribs. "How did you get that?" Silas looked down at his ribs. He traced the scar with his finger. "Knife fight, about a year ago. Some cartel guys did not want to answer my questions about where you were. I made them answer." Celine looked up at his face. "You did all this for me." Silas let out a rough laugh. He slid closer to her on the couch. The heat from his bare chest warmed her side. "Celine, I would have burned this whole country to the ground to find you. You think a few scars were going to stop me?" "I missed you," Celine whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop them. They were true. Even when her mind was clouded with Erin's drugs, there had always been an empty hole in her chest, a feeling that she belonged to someone else. Silas's eyes went dark. He reached out and grabbed her waist, pulling her across the leather couch until she was pressed firmly against his side. He wrapped his thick arm around her shoulders and pulled her into his chest. "I missed you every damn day," Silas said fiercely. He rested his chin on the top of her head. "I thought I was going to lose my mind when I saw you tonight, acting like you cared about him." "It was just an act, Silas," Celine said. She tilted her head up to look at him. "I hated him. I wanted to kill him." "I know," Silas smirked. "You proved that when you bashed his face in. You are a lot meaner than you used to be." "Good," Celine said flatly. "Being nice gets you pushed off a mountain." Silas stopped smiling. He reached down and cupped her jaw. His rough thumb stroked her cheek. He stared at her with a look of heavy, possessive need. "No one is ever going to hurt you again," Silas vowed. "You are safe now." Celine looked into his eyes. She felt the tight knot in her chest finally begin to untie. She reached up and placed her hand over his. "I know," she whispered. Silas did not wait anymore. He leaned down and captured her lips. It was not a rough, desperate kiss like the one by the tree. This one was slow, deep, and heavy. He kissed her like he had all the time in the world. He tasted her, pulling her bottom lip between his teeth and letting out a low, hot groan. Celine melted into him. She let her hands slide up his bare chest, feeling the hard muscle flex under her touch. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, wanting to erase every memory of the past 2 years. Silas shifted, pulling her onto his lap. He wrapped his arms tightly around her waist, holding her like she was the most valuable thing he had ever touched. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers. They were both breathing heavy. "We have a lot of lost time to make up for," Silas whispered. His voice was hoarse. Then stop talking, Celine murmured, pulling him back down for another kiss. The storm was over, the monster was locked in a cage, and Celine was finally exactly where she was always meant to be. The concrete floor of the basement was cold, but Aaron felt like he was on fire. The pain in his leg was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was a bright, blinding white flash that shot all the way up his spine into his brain. He clutched his shattered knee with both of his large hands. Thick, dark blood poured through his fingers, making them slippery. He let out a low, rough growl. His expensive suit pants were ruined. His empire was burning right above his head. He could hear the heavy boots of military men walking on his expensive hardwood floors upstairs. But none of that mattered. The money did not matter. The dead guards did not matter. All Aaron could think about was the cold, dead look in Celine's eyes when she pulled the trigger. She had looked at him like he was a piece of trash. After everything he had given her, she chose that dirty soldier. Jealousy burned hotter than the bullet hole in his leg. She belonged to him. She was his wife. She was his property. The heavy iron door swung open a little wider. 3 men walked into the clinic. They wore dark green military gear and carried heavy rifles. They shined bright flashlights directly into Aaron's face. "Look at this mess," one of the soldiers said. He had a deep, rough voice. He kicked a broken glass jar out of the way. "The big boss is crying on the floor. Commander said a girl shot him." "Shut the fuck up," Aaron spit out. His teeth were covered in blood. "I am going to rip your throat out." The soldiers just laughed. They did not care about his threats. To them, he was just a broken man bleeding in the dirt. A 4th man walked into the room. He carried a red medical bag. He did not say a word. He just dropped down onto his knees next to Aaron and ripped the expensive fabric of Aaron's pants wide open. Aaron yelled out a curse as the medic dug his fingers into the wound. The medic poured a bottle of cold, burning liquid straight into the bullet hole to clean it out. Aaron grabbed the leg of the heavy wooden workbench and squeezed it until his knuckles turned pure white. He tried to kick the medic away, but 2 of the soldiers stepped forward and pinned his shoulders to the ground. "Hold still, dirtbag," one of the guards muttered. "We just have to keep you alive long enough to get you to a dark cell. No one cares if it hurts." The medic shoved a thick wad of white gauze into the bullet hole. Then he wrapped Aaron's knee tightly with a heavy roll of tan tape. He wrapped it so tight that it cut off the blood flow. It was a sloppy, fast job. It was just enough to stop him from bleeding to death on the floor. "Get him up," the medic said. He packed his red bag and walked away. The 2 soldiers grabbed Aaron by the arms. They yanked him up to his feet. Aaron let out a sharp cry of pain. His bad leg could not hold any weight. It just dragged uselessly on the floor. The guards did not care. They dragged him out of the clinic, up the stairs, and onto the main floor. The smoke in the mansion was thick and black. The beautiful house Aaron had built was completely destroyed. The front doors were gone. There were bullet holes in the walls. The night air blowing in from outside smelled like burning tires. The guards dragged him out into the hot, muggy Texas night. They threw him into the back of a large armored military truck. The floor of the truck was hard metal. They pushed him down onto a bench and pulled his arms behind his back. They locked heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. "Enjoy the ride, boss," one of the soldiers said with a dark laugh. "It is a long way to nowhere." The heavy back doors of the truck slammed shut. The lock clicked. It was totally dark inside. Aaron was alone with 2 guards sitting near the front of the truck bed. The engine roared loudly and the truck started moving. It bumped hard over the dirt road, shaking Aaron's bad leg and sending fresh waves of pure torture through his body. Aaron closed his eyes. He forced himself to breathe slowly. He needed to think. He was a monster who survived by being smarter and meaner than everyone else. He was not going to die in a concrete box. He had to get out. He had to get to Celine. He moved his hands slowly behind his back. His right hand was covered in his own slick blood. The wet blood made his skin very slippery. He twisted his wrist, pulling hard against the cold metal of the handcuffs. It scraped his skin off. It hurt like hell, but he did not stop. He pulled and pulled, grinding his bones together. The truck hit a massive pothole in the road. The whole cabin shook violently. "Damn it, tell the driver to slow down," one of the guards yelled over the loud engine. The guard stood up and walked toward the small window that connected to the front cab. Aaron gave one final, brutal pull. The skin on his hand ripped open, but his hand slid free from the metal cuff. He was loose. He did not wait a single second. He pushed himself off the metal bench using only his good leg. He lunged forward through the dark. He wrapped his thick, bloody hands around the neck of the second guard who was still sitting down. The guard let out a choked gasp, dropping his rifle to the floor. Aaron squeezed with every ounce of anger in his body. He snapped the man's neck with a sharp, ugly twist. The guard went limp. The first guard turned around. What the hell is going on back there? Aaron picked up the dropped rifle from the floor. He pointed it in the dark and pulled the trigger. The loud gunshot bounced off the metal walls of the truck. The guard fell backward, hitting the door hard. Aaron dropped the rifle. He grabbed his bad leg and let out a hiss of pain. He pulled himself toward the front of the truck. He picked up a heavy flashlight from the dead guard's belt and smashed it through the small window connecting to the driver's cab. "Stop the truck," Aaron screamed. He shoved the barrel of the dead man's pistol through the broken glass. "Stop the damn truck or I will blow your head off." The driver slammed on the brakes. The heavy tires screeched on the dark highway. The truck slid to a stop on the side of an empty dirt road. "Unlock the back doors," Aaron ordered. The locks clicked open. Aaron kicked the back doors wide open. The hot night air rushed inside. He threw himself out of the truck, landing hard in the dirt. He pointed the gun at the front door. The driver stepped out slowly with his hands up. "Take it easy, man, I am just a driver." "Give me the keys," Aaron demanded. He was breathing heavily. The sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the blood. The driver tossed the keys into the dirt. Aaron shot him twice in the chest without even blinking. He did not care about fairness. He only cared about getting what he wanted. Aaron dragged himself around to the front of the truck. He climbed into the driver's seat. It hurt so much he almost threw up, but he pushed the pain down deep into his gut. He grabbed a small medical kit from the passenger seat. He found a bottle of heavy painkillers. He did not bother with water. He just swallowed 4 white pills dry. He started the engine. He knew exactly where Silas operated. He had paid dirty cops a lot of money to keep tabs on the military base 50 miles south of the highway. Silas thought he was so smart, hiding his wife on a lockdown base, but Aaron knew the blind spots. He knew how to get in. Aaron hit the gas. The truck roared down the empty highway. He turned off the headlights. He drove like a madman in the dark, letting his pure, sick obsession keep him awake. He thought about Celine's dark hair. He thought about her soft skin. He thought about the way she looked at Silas. "You are going to regret that, baby," Aaron whispered to the empty truck. 50 minutes later, Aaron parked the heavy truck in a thick patch of trees. He was a mile away from the front gates of the military base. The pain pills were working now. He felt numb and floating, but his mind was totally focused. He climbed out of the truck. He grabbed a heavy pair of wire cutters from a toolbox in the back. He grabbed a fresh rifle and 2 extra magazines of bullets. He limped through the tall, wet grass. The bugs bit his neck, but he ignored them. He reached the back fence of the base. It was a tall wire fence, far away from the bright lights of the front gate. Aaron used the heavy cutters to snap the thick metal wires one by one. It made a sharp snapping sound, but the wind covered the noise. He pulled the wire back and squeezed his large body through the hole. He was inside. He stayed in the shadows of the low, concrete buildings. He moved slowly. Every step on his bad leg sent a fresh wave of fire through his knee, but he did not stop. He looked for the small building set away from the rest, the private quarters, the only place Silas would take something he wanted to keep all to himself. Aaron spotted it, a small square building near the tree line. There was a dim light shining through the back window. Aaron dragged himself over to the window. He pressed his back against the cold concrete wall and peeked inside. His blood boiled instantly. He saw them. Celine was sitting on a brown leather couch. She was wearing a large black t-shirt that clearly belonged to Silas. Silas was sitting right next to her, shirtless. His arm was wrapped tight around her waist. He was kissing her neck and Celine was leaning into him. She had her hand resting flat on his bare chest. She looked calm. She looked happy. Aaron felt like his head was going to explode. That was his couch. That was his girl. He did not think about being quiet anymore. He just wanted to break things. He raised the heavy butt of the rifle and smashed it directly through the glass window. The glass shattered loudly, raining down onto the floor inside the house. Celine screamed and jumped back. Silas moved faster than a snake. He grabbed Celine by the waist and pulled her down behind the heavy leather couch. He reached for his gun on the table, but he was a second too late. Aaron pointed his rifle through the broken window. He fired 3 fast shots into the room. The bullets tore through the couch cushions, sending white stuffing flying into the air. "Did you really think you could leave me?" Aaron roared. His voice was ugly and crazy. He leaned through the broken window, trying to get a clear shot at the floor where they were hiding. "Pack your bags, Celine, we are going home." "You really do not know when to stay dead, do you?" Silas yelled back from behind the couch. Suddenly, Silas popped up from the side. He held a heavy black pistol. He fired twice without even aiming. The first bullet missed, hitting the concrete wall by Aaron's head. The second bullet grazed Aaron's shoulder. Aaron cursed and ducked down. He fired back blindly into the room. The loud noise of the guns echoed across the quiet military base. Heavy sirens started screaming in the distance. Bright lights turned on across the compound. The whole base was waking up. "You are a dead man, Aaron," Silas yelled. "My men are coming, you cannot even walk." Aaron gritted his teeth. He knew Silas was right. He looked down at his ruined leg. Blood was soaking through the thick tan tape again. He could not fight a whole base of trained soldiers. He had lost the element of surprise. He peeked through the window one last time. He saw Celine peeking over the top of the couch. Her dark eyes met his. She did not look scared. She looked angry. She looked like she wanted to finish the job she started in the basement. "I am going to find you," Aaron hissed into the dark. He pulled a small smoke grenade from his tactical belt. He ripped the pin out with his teeth and tossed it through the broken window. The small metal can bounced on the floor. A second later, a thick cloud of white, blinding smoke filled the entire room. Silas coughed and yelled something, but Aaron did not stay to listen. He turned around and dragged himself toward the hole in the fence. He moved as fast as a broken man could. The sirens were getting louder. Dogs were barking. Bright spotlights swept across the grass, cutting through the dark night. Aaron threw himself through the hole in the wire just as a spotlight hit the back of the building. He fell into the tall grass outside the base. He crawled on his stomach, dragging his useless leg through the mud, moving like a snake back to his stolen truck. He climbed into the driver's seat and hit the gas. He drove away into the absolute darkness, leaving the screaming sirens far behind him. He was broken, bleeding, and alone, but he was alive, and he was never going to stop hunting her. The thick white smoke burned Celine's eyes and throat. She coughed hard, waving her hand in front of her face. The alarm outside the small building was screaming loudly into the night. Silas grabbed her by the arm and pulled her up from the floor. He pushed her toward the short hallway, away from the broken glass and the smoke. His large hands moved quickly over her arms and her chest, checking her for bullet holes. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling against the soft fabric of his dark shirt. "I am fine," Celine choked out. She pushed his heavy hands away from her waist. She was not shaking anymore. The fear was completely gone, replaced by a hot, angry fire in her stomach. He missed. Silas let out a harsh string of curse words. He pressed the button on his shoulder radio. His voice was a low, deadly growl. "Bravo team, we have a breach at my quarters. The target is mobile. He is on foot and bleeding heavily. Lock down the perimeter. Shoot on sight." He let go of the radio and looked down at Celine. The smoke was starting to clear out of the broken window, blowing away into the hot Texas wind. Silas had a hard, dark look in his eyes. He stepped closer to her, backing her against the wall of the hallway. He leaned his hands on the wall beside her head, trapping her there. "You should have shot him in the head," Silas said flatly. Celine lifted her chin. She stared right back into his dark eyes. "I wanted him to suffer. I did not know your highly trained soldiers would let a man with a shattered knee walk out the front door." Silas let out a dry, rough laugh. He shook his head and leaned down until his nose brushed against hers. "Do not push your luck, Wildcat. My men were putting out the fires you started at the mansion. But do not worry. I am going to find him, and I am going to put him in the dirt where he belongs." Miles away from the bright lights of the military base, Aaron drove the stolen truck down a dark, narrow dirt road. He drove with his right foot, keeping his ruined left leg stretched out stiffly. Every time the heavy truck hit a rock or a hole, a fresh wave of terrible pain shot up his leg. It felt like his bones were grinding together. He screamed into the empty cabin, hitting the steering wheel with his bloody fist. He was sweating so much his shirt was soaked. He pulled the truck deep into the woods, hiding it under the thick branches of old oak trees. He shut off the engine. The sudden quiet of the woods made the ringing in his ears seem much louder. He sat in the dark for a long minute, just breathing through his teeth. There was an old hunting cabin hidden out here in the brush. Aaron had bought it years ago under a fake name to store dirty cash and extra weapons. It was a place that did not exist on any map. He opened the truck door and fell out onto the dirt. He could not walk. He had to crawl on his hands and his right knee, dragging his left leg behind him. The wet mud soaked through his clothes. Bugs bit his face and neck, but he just kept dragging himself forward. He reached the wooden porch of the cabin and pulled himself up the steps. He felt under the welcome mat and found the rusted key. He unlocked the door and pushed his way inside. It smelled like dust and old wood. He dragged himself into the small bathroom and turned on the single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Aaron sat on the dirty floor and looked at his leg. The tan tape the military medic had wrapped around his knee was completely soaked in dark red blood. He ripped the tape off, biting his lip so hard it bled. The bullet hole was a nasty, open mess. He pulled a dusty medical box from under the sink. He found a bottle of cheap brown whiskey, a thick needle and some heavy black thread. He opened the whiskey and drank half the bottle in 3 huge swallows. The liquor burned his throat and made his stomach flip, but it helped dull the sharp edges of the pain. He poured the rest of the whiskey directly into the open bullet hole. He roared in pure agony, throwing his head back against the bathtub. He grabbed the needle and started stitching the torn skin together. It was a fast, ugly job. He wrapped the knee tightly in clean white bandages and tied it off. It was not pretty, but it would hold him together for one more day. He dragged himself into the bedroom and opened a large metal safe hidden in the closet. The safe was packed with neat stacks of cash and heavy black weapons. He did not touch the money. He grabbed a heavy sniper rifle, a black machine gun, and a tactical vest full of extra bullets. He sat on the edge of the dusty bed and loaded the magazines. His mind was racing. He kept seeing Celine sitting on that couch wearing another man's shirt. He remembered the smell of her skin and the soft sound of her voice. She was his. He had paid for her. He had kept her locked up and safe. Silas had no right to touch her. Aaron was going to kill the soldier, and then he was going to take Celine far away where no one would ever find them. He was going to make her remember who her real master was. The morning sun came up hot and bright over the military base. The air was already thick and sticky. Celine sat on the edge of the bed in Silas's quarters. She had put on her own dirty clothes again because Silas told her they were leaving. Silas walked into the room. He was wearing full combat gear. He had a heavy black vest over his green shirt and a pistol strapped to his thigh. He carried a smaller black vest in his hands. He tossed it onto the bed next to her. "Put that on," Silas ordered. Celine looked at the heavy vest. She crossed her arms. "I am not wearing that. It smells like sweat and cheap plastic." "Put it on, or I will put it on you," Silas said. He stepped closer to the bed, crossing his thick arms over his chest. He gave her a slow, challenging look. "And trust me, my hands will wander." Celine glared at him, but she picked up the heavy vest. She slipped it over her head and pulled the side straps tight. It was very heavy and uncomfortable. It pressed down on her chest. "Where are we going?" she asked. "We are moving to the command center in the city," Silas explained. He checked the clip in his rifle. "This base is too exposed out here in the open. Aaron knows where we are now. The command center is built like a bank vault. He will never get inside." "You think he is still coming?" Celine asked softly. Silas stopped checking his gun. He looked at her. "He is crazy, Celine, and he is obsessed with you. He is not going to stop until he is dead, but do not worry. I want him to come. I want him to step out into the open so I can end this." They walked outside into the baking heat. 3 massive black armored trucks were parked in a line on the dirt road. Silas led her to the middle truck. He opened the heavy back door and helped her climb up into the back seat. He sat down right next to her. 4 heavily armed soldiers sat in the front seats and the back corners. The trucks started moving. They rolled out of the base gates and turned onto the long, dusty highway. The road was lined with high dirt ridges and thick green brush. 5 miles down the road, Aaron lay flat on his stomach on top of a dirt ridge. He looked through the scope of his heavy sniper rifle. The sun beat down on his back, making him sweat profusely. His knee throbbed with a dull, sickening ache. He had left the stolen truck hidden in the trees behind him. He watched the highway like a hungry wolf. He knew Silas would move her. The soldier was too smart to stay in a compromised location. Aaron waited perfectly still. Through the scope, he saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance. The 3 black trucks rolled down the highway, moving fast. Aaron lined up the crosshairs of his scope on the front tire of the lead truck. He took a slow breath, held it, and pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against his shoulder. The loud crack echoed over the empty plains. The front tire of the lead truck exploded in a shower of black rubber and dust. The heavy truck swerved violently, spinning out of control. It crashed sideways into the dirt ditch, blocking the entire road. The second and third trucks slammed on their brakes, sliding to a rough stop just behind the crash. Aaron quickly moved his aim to the middle truck. That was where the VIPs always sat. He aimed at the dark, tinted window in the back and fired 2 more shots. The heavy bullets smashed against the glass, leaving white spiderweb cracks, but they did not break through. The glass was armored. "Get out," Aaron yelled to himself. He kept firing at the doors of the middle truck, hoping to break the locks. But Silas was not a normal target. The back doors of the third truck suddenly flew open. Silas jumped out into the dust, holding his rifle. He did not look surprised. He looked perfectly calm. He pointed his rifle straight up at the dirt ridge. "Contact right," Silas yelled to his men. Suddenly the brush all around Aaron's position exploded. Bullets tore through the dirt and rocks right next to his head. Wood chips flew off the trees. Aaron ducked down, burying his face in the mud. The noise was deafening. There was no way to shoot back. Silas had known he would try an ambush. Silas had used the middle truck as a decoy and rode in the back vehicle just to trap him. Aaron dropped the sniper rifle. He grabbed his machine gun and fired blindly over the ridge, just trying to keep the soldiers from rushing up the hill. He rolled onto his back. He had to get out of there. He had lost again. He crawled backward down the steep, muddy side of the ridge. He slid through the thick, wet weeds, tearing the bandages on his knee. He tumbled hard to the bottom of the hill and crashed into a shallow, muddy creek. The dirty water splashed over his face. Up on the road, he could hear Silas yelling harsh orders. "Move up the hill, do not let him breathe, flush him out." Aaron forced himself to stand up. He leaned heavily against a giant, rotting tree trunk. He dragged himself into the thick, dark swamp water, pulling his body under the massive, tangled roots of the tree. He sunk down until only his nose and eyes were above the muddy water. He held his breath and stayed completely still. He heard the heavy boots of the soldiers running down the hill. They splashed into the creek just a few feet away from him. "I lost his trail," a soldier yelled. He went into the water. "Spread out," Silas's voice rang out from the top of the ridge. "Check the brush, he cannot move fast." Aaron closed his eyes. The muddy water was freezing. He waited in the dark roots while the soldiers searched the banks. They walked right past his hiding spot. He did not move a muscle. He slowly let out a tiny breath of air. He had failed. Celine was gone again. He was hiding in the mud like a rat. But as he sat in the cold water, the dark, burning hate in his chest only grew stronger. He was going to heal his leg. He was going to buy more guns. And next time he was not going to aim for the tires. He was going to aim straight for Silas's heart.